Thank you and welcome to this edition of the Special Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, June 3rd. We don't have any regrets tonight. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none. Is there any disclosure of monetary interest?
I'm going to disclose on the Bill 108 stuff again.
Okay. Thank you. Our only delegation tonight, welcome to Nathaniel Morris from Canada's Cannabis Project, and he'll be updating us on the living laboratory work. Welcome, Nate.
Thanks very much.
You press the button.
Can you hear me? Excellent. Thanks very much for having me. My name again is Nathaniel Morris. I addressed the council a few months ago regarding the plan for a living laboratory. I just wanted to come back and provide a few updates. We've made a great deal of progress since then. We've gotten some fantastic feedback, been working very closely with the business community to try to set up some establishments that are capable of receiving these licenses. The organization that we formed is called CCP, or Canada's Cannabis Project, and that company is dedicated to the Living Laboratory project. The first business that we're going to be attempting to license is owned by Brian down the street. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. He owns Axe and Arrow and Cafe Wim, and I've been working closely with him over the past couple months, and we've been developing a menu and SOPs and whatnot, and it's been going very well, and we're quite optimistic that we should receive an experimental research license shortly. I've also been discussing it with my lawyer, and several of the preliminary experiments that we want to do don't actually even require a license to do, so we've been able to begin some initial R&D amongst ourselves, and that's been going quite well. The other thing that I wanted to describe to you, I wanted to introduce a term called smart city technology. And that sounds like it's a little bit different from what we've been doing, but there's actually a great deal of overlap, and that's what I wanted to bring to your attention. So the idea behind the Living Laboratory was that not only do we want to conduct some cannabis scientific research, but we want to approach it holistically as a town, and we want to use this project to encourage cannabis tourism. And it's not about just getting one business licensed, it's about getting a variety of business licensed and having the data that each one of them generates work synergistically so that we can study how cannabis affects our guests as a group. And that, in an unusual way, really is a quintessential example of smart city technology. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a few minutes and describe smart city technology for anyone who might not be familiar with it. But the most classic example of smart city technology is garbage cans that know when they're full. And the idea there is that rather than a garbage truck going around and emptying all the garbage cans, they have an app, and when a garbage can fills up, it alerts the garbage disposal, and they come and just deliver that. And another example is street lights that dim themselves. The thing that these technologies have in common aren't that they're particularly high tech, but that they work synergistically, and that a town can benefit from all of these technologies working connectedly. Now, what we're talking about with the Living Laboratory uses smart city technology. It uses technologies that are a little less common and familiar to people. They're called wearables. So biometric sensors that monitor your heart rate, your blood pressure, levels of anxiety. We have ones that can even do brain imagery and whatnot, but all of those are examples of smart city technologies. And in general, as we move forward with the Living Laboratory project, we're going to be framing it in the smart city technology framework, because there's actually a very well-developed infrastructure in Canada for embracing this type of technology. There's funding available, and there's a great deal of assistance in terms of good governance with the data, and it's a well-trodden thing. So I wanted to bring that to your attention and hopefully begin a dialogue where we can talk about not only how smart city technology can be applied to cannabis research, but more generally how it can benefit the town in any number of ways. So with that, I was going to invite any questions that council may have, or anyone regarding this.
Yes, Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you. It sounds exciting, and it sounds like something that is going to be good for our community. I just have a question around edibles, because I don't know a lot about them.
Sure.
We just came back from a conference where we had a large session on cannabis and, age when people should be using it and whatever. So if you're in a restaurant or if you're doing tourism using cannabis edibles, how do you regulate the amount and the age of the user and that sort of thing? Or
Great question. So the age thing is quite simple. It's simply not available to young people. And in fact, the establishments themselves need to be age gated. It's not good enough that you can't serve it to them. They can't even be exposed to it because I think that's reasonable. I think that we don't want to create an environment where even children are observing adults consuming it. We want to just really differentiate those two things. In terms of dosage, that's a big part of the goals of the research that we're doing. So currently they're scheduled to roll out cannabis-infused foods in October. And those foods are going to be produced by licensed producers like Canopy. And so those will be very strictly regulated in terms of the dose calibration. They'll all contain either like 2.5 or 5 or 10 milligrams per edible. It's much more challenging to regulate something like a restaurant or a bakery, and that's the reason that isn't currently available. And Canada may very well decide to make that federally available down the road, but they need to study how best to make that work, which is what we're trying to do on a very small scale. We're experimenting with ways of doing very precise dose calibration. And again, like even in our experimental facilities, the intent is not to have it be a free-for-all. The intent is to have very careful, basically take every recipe and turn it into a standard operating procedure where we very carefully regulate what the dose is. And then once each of the menu items has been standardized, we're having it chemically analyzed, so we're absolutely certain that each dish has exactly the number of milligrams that we say it has.
Mayor Panko?
Thanks, Nate, again for your insight. I think we're very fortunate that you chose Smiths Falls as your home, and you brought your 20 years of, I guess, experience roughly in the cannabis industry to our community. A couple of questions. One, how do you see this evolving over the next few years, the CCP and across the country? And secondly, is there anybody else who's doing this right now?
Great questions. Thank you very much. So in terms of the evolution of it, I see this in, like, obviously the biggest payoffs are going to come down the road once we've successfully made this a cannabis tourism destination and whatnot. But I see over the next several years that hitting a real tipping point, and it's a lot. I see Smiths Falls right now in this moment of history a lot like the great wine destinations were in the early 90s. The wine tourism is now a very well-established thing, and currently I believe it's 3 million people come to Canada each year for wine tourism. But in the 80s, wine tourism wasn't a thing at all, and then several wine destinations basically did what we're doing, and they carefully thought about what they can do to attract tourists to a new type of tourism. And several places were enormously successful, and I think that if we follow the path that they were successfully able to execute, and we encourage local businesses to cater to an influx of tourists, and we get the word out so tourists know that this is an option, I think we're going to see a huge influx of tourists, and there's a chicken and egg aspect to it. Like we need to get local businesses that are already able to sustain themselves to get licensed so that they can operate in this current period where there isn't a ton of cannabis tourists. And then that infrastructure just needs to build, and we need to do what we're doing basically in order to encourage new businesses to form and meet the increasing demand. But we're optimistic that even at a small scale, like if you figure there's 3 million tourists coming to Canada every year for wine tourism, if we were to get 5% of that, that's 150,000 visitors coming here every year, and that would be roughly $25 million in direct spending and $65 million in ancillary spending. So the opportunity is enormous.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Councilor McGuire?
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Excellent presentation and update. The collection of data is really exciting, and there's lots of discussions happening in Toronto right now with the Queen's Quay project. How will we protect the tourists' right to privacy, and when we're collecting personal data?
Great question. That the issues that are going on in Toronto are actually really helpful for this conversation, and it's one of the reasons why I thought it would be helpful to introduce the term smart city technology. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with, Toronto is one of the cities that's really leading the way with smart city technology, and they had a partnership with Google. It's actually a company owned by Google called Sidewalk Labs that was doing this elaborate smart city technology on the waterfront. And a bunch of people got very concerned about privacy rules and ended up suing Google, and it's this big brouhaha right now. Now, fortunately, in our circumstance, because we're doing medical research, it's not just anybody who strolls along our boardwalk gets like their data consumed. In order to have their data ingested into our system, they would first need to sign paperwork clearly saying that this is what they're doing. And because it's medical information, there's very strict rules around medical privacy. So whereas many of the concerns that people had about what Sidewalk Labs were doing would never have been an option for us anyways, because what we're doing is considered a form of medical research. But that said, I think good governance around how we manage data is important for this, and transparency is important for this. And because the goal for what we're doing is, it's not just that we're trying to gather a whole bunch of data so that we can do some interesting things with it. We want to do some interesting things with it, but we also want to give access to the whole country so that the federal government can make data-driven choices around policy positions in cannabis. And for that, we need to show our work. They can't just take our word for it. We need to be able to show them how we gathered the data, how we structured it and analyzed it. And so this does need to be, at least a large component of it needs to be an open source thing where various groups have access to it. And so I feel like we're going to be able to navigate those issues quite well, but I think it would be really helpful if the council as a whole engaged in that and thought through the different implications of our gathering data, and if there are any concerns that we address them and whatnot.
Just based on the nature of the medical research, is it even an option to have the data de-identified at source, or?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So basically, as people get onboarded into the system, there's a variety of different corpuses that hold their information, and the only one that holds any identifying information is the initial corpus, and that gets scrubbed immediately. So once the machine learning systems begin analyzing it, the data set that they're going to be analyzing will have already been scrubbed of any potentially identifying information.
Councilor McKenna and then Councilor Brennan.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.
In February, I believe you sent a submission to Health Canada with the concept idea. Mm-hmm. Have you heard anything back from Health Canada? They acknowledge or?
I've had many helpful interactions, not specifically on the offer that was to the Strategic Policy Directorate, and I even tried following up with them again today, and that's been more or less a black box. But since then, I've reached out in a variety of different ways and talked to people who've received these permits, and one of the key insights that was offered to me was that we're going to have a lot easier time getting permission to conduct this research than we are convincing them to use the data that we're generating, which was a helpful concept to understand that they are not particularly. They're quite generous with these permits. They're not trying to stop people from doing cannabis research. Now, once we do this research, depending on our data set, the number of people we've brought, how excellent a job we do at gathering the data and normalizing it, it might be something that they see as enormously valuable and therefore want to make key to their policy decisions. They could conceivably look at it and say, this isn't up to our standards, and then that doesn't mean that we didn't have permission to do the research. It just means they didn't end up implementing the data. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thanks. And you just reminded me, have you considered an ethics review for the research? Or?
Yes, yes, indeed. It's definitely going to be part of the process.
Thank you.
Councilor Brennan.
Asked and answered there, but I will comment on further on the conference we were at, and we had a session on cannabis. It was FCM, Federal Canadian Municipalities Conference, and there was a presentation from 3 or 4 communities. None of this concept of cannabis tourism came around. It was mostly about concerns that municipalities have around enforcement and additional costs and that sort of thing. And last night I was speaking to a CEO from near Tofino, BC, and I talked to him a bit about cannabis tourism and used the wine analogy that you gave us at the Economic Development Committee meeting.
Nice.
And he had no notion of it. And in fact, he was going to take it back and talk about it to his council because, so we're on the leading edge here for sure.
That's excellent.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good to hear.
Very good.
Any other questions? Mayor Panko?
Just one final question, Nate, and anything more we can do to help further the progress or to advocate or to make a difference?
Yeah, great question. So I guess the main thing that I would ask is if we could, in the coming months, follow up with a greater discussion around the smart city technology. We're gonna, ideally, there's a new entry in the Smart City Challenge coming up that we would like to help participate with, but that's not just about cannabis research. That's about all things that we can do with smart city technology. I would encourage you to ask your constituents if they have ideas and insights into ways that we could apply smart city technology, because that really needs to be a community-driven effort.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. As always, Nathaniel brings more information with him than so we'll move on to the adoption of minutes for Monday, May 13th, Committee of the Whole meeting, and Monday, May 27th for the Committee of the Whole meeting. So moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McKenna. All in favor? Thank you. CAO, are there reports?
Given that this is a special committee, we will reserve reporting until next week.
There are no correspondence items due to the nature of the meeting, and there are no in-camera issues due to the nature of the meeting. So we begin with priority issue number 1, or A, Beckwith Street Delegation's public meeting discussion. And with council's permission, I would like to go first, and then I can better manage as a chair to make sure everyone's heard. If there are no objections, then I'll start off. So I feel like we've been on a long road to get this far. And I sort of want to set the stage for the question that's coming. So in August 2012, there was a request for proposal was let for the research and creation of the downtown revitalization and waterfront master plan. And according to the staff's recommendation that came later, there were 4 public meetings at various stages. There's information done in radio interviews, numerous advertisements, articles in the EMC, and bi-weekly information updates on the town websites. And also consultants met with individual business and property owners in the downtown core over a 2-day period leading up to that. And then that was in August 2012. And then in April 2013, staff's recommendation was to adopt the policy and guidelines provided in the master plan. And in May 2013, council adopted bylaw 8576-213 in a vote of 4-0 to adopt the policies and guidelines provided in the master plan. One of the, just of interest, one of the very first things that came out of that master plan was the community improvement plan, and council supported the allocation of monies in the 2014 budget. In the strategic plan 2015 to 2018 that was done by previous council, after public consultation, several objectives in that document involved the redevelopment of downtown and the waterfront, in keeping with the bylaw that had adopted the waterfront and downtown revitalization. That initiative in that strategic plan 5.1.5 was to complete the Beckwith Street redevelopment plan, and it was scheduled for 2017. So between September 2017 and February 2018, there was, again, a raft of public consultation. working groups, public meetings, presentations to the DBA and the Chamber, a session for the business community, the Station Theatre, delegations at council, discussions at committee of the whole, as well as having all the presentation materials on the town's website with an invitation to comment on them at that time. And all of that was in place and led to, before council adopted an angle parking design for Beckwith Street in February of 2018. In October 2018, this council was elected, and in January 2019, this council revisited exactly the same material considered by the previous council, but came to a different conclusion based on provincial policy for both accessibility and land use planning and development for municipalities that recommended a complete streets model, the town's official plan, the 2015 to 18 strategic plan, that a complete streets design, that this council decided that a complete streets design was more in keeping with all of that and took the appropriate action to adopt it, adopt complete streets for the Beckwith Street redevelopment. There was no requirement or, in my opinion, need to have more public consultation on the subject of rescinding the previous council's decision or on the vote to adopt a complete streets model. This council looked at exactly the same evidence that the previous council had in their possession and came to a different conclusion. That will happen throughout this term. We will look at decisions or bylaws or other things, and we may decide to change them. At the Committee of the Whole meeting on February 25th, after a discussion on the subject of providing a public forum in which to hear and answer questions from the public on the process and on the design, Council asked that staff bring back a report on options for public engagement. And on March 4th, staff brought back report 2019-27, and there were 6 options in that for public engagement in that report. They were discussed, and the consensus on the action resulting from that discussion was that council would move forward with expanding and receiving delegations and directed staff to begin taking applications for that. Again, in that discussion, the consensus for further action on that process was to allow 2 20-minute delegations at the following meeting, and that any further delegation requests after that must note their questions on the delegation form, and that they would be screened by the clerk and CAO to ensure that we weren't answering the same question over and over. Additionally, in the last 4 months, councils received and responded to numerous emails. We've received petitions. We've had telephone conversations, in-person conversations with residents and downtown people. Senior staff have also responded to email inquiries. I've also had meetings with residents to address their specific concerns. And to date, council has received 5 delegations related to the subject of complete streets design, which includes a parallel parking configuration as opposed to the angle parking configuration. The question of whether this council will reverse itself, I think we've been clear that that's been answered several times. The question today is whether council will choose to proceed with more delegations, or the 2 delegations that are currently in the lineup that we have delayed. But there are in those delegation requests no specific questions. That was the direction of council on March 4th, that there be specific questions detailed. I think if we are to move forward with the 2 delegations that are in our lineup, for a better term, that council's direction was that we see the questions that want to be asked, and those people, those gentlemen, I believe it's gentlemen, have been waiting, and I would like to see the questions they would like to ask. That was the direction council gave a committee of the whole on March the 4th. We've all heard the arguments against complete streets, and we have listened to them. But I do believe that it's wholly counterproductive to continue to go over this same ground over and over, and I believe it's time to end the discussions at the council table on 3 specific things. One is the motion that we did to rescind has been, it's over. We did it, and we're not revisiting it. There is not seemingly the appetite to revisit that. The adoption of the Complete Streets model was a decision by council that, again, there is no seeming appetite to revisit that. And the question of the public meeting on to discuss those decisions was also decided by council on March the 4th, when we gave direction that we would have an expanded delegation process, that we would allow 20 minutes, that we would, and we have received 5, and hopefully we'll receive 2 more. In 1925, the council of the day decided to pave Beckwith Street, and it was met with a great deal of resistance. The cost to pave was enormous. Many felt the dirt street was better for horses. There were letters to council stating that people would never shop downtown again if they couldn't bring their horses, their horse-drawn wagons and carriages in. There were letters sent to council from farmers and people outside the borders of Smiths Falls, that there were petitions circulating. The author of one of the letters accused council of creating a downtown to favor the automobile, because they believed that cars were just a fad and too expensive for average Canadians. They argued that the wide street was designed for large wagons. Council proceeded to pave the street, and despite the opposition, the result was more shops opening and Smiths Falls becoming the center of commerce in the county. We still have lots to figure out. We have to figure out if we can save the $933,000 grant for the underground work by talking to Greenbelt about the town's options. We still have to figure out what a construction schedule would look like. We still have to see if our application for Connecting Links funding will be successful. And when we get all that information, we'll discuss it at the council table, and at that point, we should engage the public in numerous ways, including public information sessions, to outline the next steps for our residents and for our business community. We currently have a housing crisis. We have decisions to make on many issues that are important to our residents. We have problems to solve that, in my opinion, are more meaningful than how we park. So I am prepared to put a resolution on the table tonight to, and if council's willing, that it will move, because the one mistake we made, and maybe it was a rookie mistake, is that on that committee of, and I believe Councillor Dwyer was chairing it, the one sort of mistake we made that night was not to have it covered by a resolution, and so there was no formal vote. So my intention tonight is to put a resolution forward that, and I don't know, what is it normal to read these, the proposed resolution? Okay. To direct staff that they follow the direction given on March 4th in the Committee of the Whole, to have delegations detail their questions as directed by, and the clerk and CAO in that meeting were directed to ensure there were no duplicates. That would apply to the new delegation requests currently on the table. Further, that council will not accept any further delegations after those two wishing to speak on the topic of the Complete Streets, rescinding the previous council's motion, or on angle parking. And further, that it's understood that council made the decision on the method of public engagement on March the 4th, 2019, but it was not previously brought forward by resolution. And that would be the resolution. I might have to fine-tune the language, but that would be the resolution that I would like to see move forward to council tonight. Now, I'm sure there will be talk about that, and so I open the floor to my colleagues. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you for that background and detail of how we got to where we are tonight. Certainly, my decision to vote in January for rescinding this was very much to do with the Beckwith Street redevelopment, the waterfront redevelopment master plan that previous councils had adopted and supported. And in there, the vision was much greater than how we parked our cars. It's a much bigger vision, and I think better suited to the future for Smiths Falls and for the children that are going to benefit from our downtown redevelopment. So I will support your resolution when it comes forward. I think that whatever options come out of Director Dunlop's work with Greenbelt, whatever options come out of that for funding, I think there will be, there would need to be information sessions with the public, opportunities to engage the public on that, because that's we think may be different than what we're talking about right now. And I would welcome that process, and I think there are many ways of engaging the public if and when that time comes where we actually have a way to move forward with Beckwith Street, which we currently don't have. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Well, I won't support it. The notion, we've gone over this, and it's been repudiated. 2013 master plan was voted and adopted by council, 4 members of council, all of whom I know are opposed to what's happening. The CIP was part of it. I would remind everyone that the CIP was adopted by council after debate around this horseshoe. The notion of a Beckwith Promenade, or whatever you want to call it, was never debated around this horseshoe 6 years ago. The question before us, which was before us last week and was discontinued because of an event, is this. We received a tender on April 11th, which was far and above what was expected. At that time, council decided to take a pause on receiving delegations as they had agreed to do until we had heard from the director on next steps. We heard from the director on April 15th. 2 delegation requests came in early April. We are now in June. I have seen the requests. I think they're valid. I want to hear from both gentlemen. They're both respected people for different reasons. And I'm satisfied that they have concerns that are unique to what we have heard previously. So, and I also reject the notion that after those 2, that'll be it. I think that part of the problem that we're having is an attitude or a perception that we don't want to listen to people. A decision's been made. I respect representative democracy, which means that elected officials make decisions based not on popularity, on the notion that, but you know, part of representative democracy is having an open ear to the public, and we just haven't done our due diligence, and it should have been done in January. The previous council heard from the people, made a decision. This council did not hear from the people. They took the information from the previous council, and I just don't think that's right. So I want to hear from the delegations, and I think that this council needs to figure out how we're going to communicate with the taxpayers of this town. So no, I won't support that motion.
Mayor Panko, I believe you were next.
Thank you. I mean, the redevelopment of Beckwith Street is long overdue. We know that the water and sewer is older than anyone in our community. We need to separate storm sewers from sanitary sewers. There is limited accessibility today, and it's a project that's been sitting on the back burner for decades. It's a project that should unite, not divide us. It's a redevelopment that will breathe new life into our downtown, will serve the needs of our community for decades to come, probably for 40 or 50 years or more. Yet the issue of street design continues to come before this council. When a decision was made 19 weeks ago tonight to move ahead with a street design that makes our downtown safer, more accommodating to everyone regardless of their mobility or mode of transportation. Those opposed to council's decision suggest we aren't listening. They're asking why we aren't changing our decision despite public opposition. And why is the right question? Why would council maintain an environment that is dangerous to cyclists when we can create a much safer design, separating cyclists from motor vehicles? Why would we maintain a parking arrangement that creates barriers to accessibility when we can remove those barriers and obstacles and create a barrier-free access to the sidewalks? Why would we preserve a parking style that limits the functionality of handicapped accessible vehicles and for rear ramping vans creates a prohibitively dangerous environment when we can build an accommodative downtown where every parking space is accessible and is functionally superior for both side and rear ramping vehicles? And why would we reverse our decision and revert to an angled parking arrangement when the complete streets design does so much more for so many more people from all walks of life, creates a much safer, accommodative environment for anyone with mobility challenges? And why would council ignore the recommendations of the professional planners and transportation engineers we hired to oversee the project, and in doing so disregard planning principles currently being followed by municipalities representing over 85% of Ontario's population, as well as countless other municipalities and communities across Canada and North America? Safety has to be the first priority. And council has listened. We've listened to voices on both sides of this issue. And we've heard from those that speak quietly as much as we've heard from those who speak the loudest. I don't think we're demanding too much when we ask that those parking their vehicles do so differently so that everyone can enjoy our downtown. The people of Smiths Falls are known for their welcoming and kind nature. They're known to be friendly, neighborly, always willing to go out of their way to make life better for their fellow citizens. For those opposed to council's decision, I simply ask, isn't it worth altering how we park on Beckwith Street so we can have a safer, more accessible downtown for everyone? We're living in very exciting and positive times for our community. We're seeing progress on many fronts, and considering the challenges we faced a decade ago, the economic and social renewal we are experiencing today is reshaping our future in ways we could never have imagined before. I respect people's right to disagree with council's decision and the right to protest, but I have concerns with the constant horn honking on Monday evenings. It's become a frustrating irritation to too many of our citizens on Monday nights. Although honking of horns has had no effect and will have no effect on council's resolve, it's inconsiderate to our town hall staff, to downtown businesses, and people living in the area. Without question, it's limiting the opportunity for our citizens to enjoy their properties during every council meeting. And I simply ask that those who are doing so think about their fellow citizens and the impact they're having on their quality of life. And furthermore, the excessive noise is disrespectful to the delegations addressing council, and we've seen many nights here where the delegates have a difficult time presenting to council. The gallery has a difficult time hearing the people, and furthermore, the press present have a hard time hearing council at times and are unable to do their job due to the constant honking of horns. Brings me to the two questions we're addressing tonight. Number one, should council continue to receive delegations regarding the Beckwith Street redevelopment? And two, should council hold some type of public meeting or open house regarding the project? If this was a subject council was debating, My answer, of course, would be yes to both. But I understand we previously received 2 requests for delegations on this issue. I am agreeable, like many of my colleagues, to hearing from these people if they would still like to address council. However, I do not believe we are serving anyone's best interest by continuing to hear delegations on the same subject, same topics, over and over. We've long maintained a policy where citizens are welcome to contact and meet with members of council or staff on this redevelopment or any other subject. And if anyone has any further questions or constructive suggestions, I encourage them to do so. I think all of us have an open door policy. Once we have a better understanding of our ability to move ahead with at least part of this project in 2019, I'm also supportive of holding a public open house to share the finer details of the redevelopment so that people of our community can see firsthand how a complete street design works and why council believes it's the best solution for Beckwith. It will also be an opportunity to provide public feedback. Unfortunately, an undercurrent of negativity, fueled by a sometimes toxic Facebook environment, has cast a shadow over our community at a time when we are seeing positives in every direction. This sense of pessimism is not exclusive to this topic and not unique to our community. However, it's not representative of our community, and it will not darken the bright sense of optimism that we all have for our collective futures. I'm reminded every day that Smiths Falls is a community that cares, a community where kindness and thoughtfulness is part of everyday life. I mean, these are really the best of times. So I will support 2 more delegations. I will support the motion, and I look forward to an opportunity to share further news of this redevelopment when possible later this summer. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Yes, it's not difficult for me to support this because in the last term of office, I was one of a few who decided the decision that the council made was wrong. In fact, the night that it was made, I went home and was sad and thought that, it was a big mistake, but I got on with it because that was the way it was going to be, and I never shared that with anybody. And I didn't know anything about a rescind. At that time, I had no idea, and I didn't know about that until the beginning of this term. But I can't, when I have an opportunity to do what I think in my heart is the right thing to do, change my mind because it's going to make everybody happy. I'm sad that it makes some people very unhappy. I wish I could turn it backwards and make everybody feel good about what's happening, but I can't. And I can't in good conscience not do what I think based on what I read and the research that we did and all of the things that we've done in the past and we've done again. I think this is the best for the future of our town. And I hope I'm right. I mean, no one has an answer right now which would be the very best. But I think, given what I know and the job that I've been given to do, that's what's best for our community.
Thank you. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will not support the resolution, as I did not support it when it was originally discussed at Committee of the Whole. I'm encouraged by the message from Mayor Pankow, particularly regarding an opportunity for public consultation this summer. I would like us to commit to providing a date for that and a scope of what to expect. I would also like to respectfully suggest that we postpone any public consultation that the planning department does around a parking study until that public engagement session takes place. I don't think there's any rush on the parking study, and my fear, as I articulated last week, is that it will become the focus for our attention where it should not be. I do fundamentally have concerns with changing the rules of engagement around the delegation process mid-cycle. I don't think it is fair to change the rules on one particular topic. I think if the procedural bylaw had more specific definition around when and where council would make a decision to halt delegation process, I would be more inclined to consider that. But I will not support muzzling people who wish to come and approach council in an open and transparent forum in person to provide their opinion on a subject. I think the delegation process has never been subject to a prohibition of repeat topics. It has never needed to be, and I think it's a dangerous game to do so now. So on the issue of precedent, I will not support restricting delegations.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire?
Thank you. I've got a couple questions on the resolution just to make sure everything's, and it's kind of open, like if any member of council or staff have something to add, I'd love to hear it. So Mayor Panko's used the term public open house, I believe. I just want to confirm that this resolution will not limit public engagement after the tender negotiations are complete.
As I've put it forward, and again, it may need to be wordsmiths so that we can address the gaps in the procedural bylaws, but yeah, this resolution is very specific, I think, and maybe we can wordsmith it so it can be even more specific. My intention here with this resolution is to stop Groundhog Day. Stop talking about the rescind motion, stop talking about the decision council made on complete streets, and stop pursuing a public meeting on those topics. And I think that's as specific as I could. We may need the clerk's help but beyond that, Councillor McGuire, it's business as usual.
Okay, and on a more specific note, there's nothing limiting public engagement with specific groups such as people facing accessibility challenges, since we have a lot of questions on that note, if we wanted to have some kind of
That is not the intent of this, and if we need to be very precise in the language to ensure that, no, it's not cutting off any of that. This is specifically, we have been, tonight I think is our 6-month anniversary being at council. We've been 4 months on this trail of seemingly consistently over and over and over discussing the same things. And we need, I feel, we need to move on to things that are, I hate to say it, probably more important. The Beckwith Street redevelopment is, particularly the underground work, is extremely important. But we have a lot of important things to get to, and we have all the oxygen has been sucked out of this room. I'm not talking about in the public forum or what the discussions are about there. I'm talking about at this table. Those 3 decisions were made, and I would say to my colleagues that it's our individual duty to support the decisions made by council, even if a member disagrees with a majority decision. So my goal here with this resolution is to, let's move on past these 3 questions.
Okay. And my last question is more directed towards staff. It's just, is there anything under this resolution that might compromise our obligations or duties under a code of conduct or procedural bylaw or anything the like? Okay, sorry.
Can you restate the first one?
What's that?
Can you restate what Carrie said?
The only thing I can say is that was the first that I've actually heard the resolution, so I'd have to really look at it and review it before I could comment on that.
Okay, is this something that would go, if passed at the committee, the whole goes to council then for a formal?
It would, and the timing of that, of course, is up to you, whether it's this evening or an upcoming council meeting.
Okay, and if there was any red flags between now and then, the vote at council is what's final?
Yes.
Okay. I think my last point isn't a question, but just when it comes up to the parking consultation, I think it's really important that we don't let the Beckwith issue start to hijack or derail other important projects we have going on in the town. I remember when we had the strategic plan meeting, it came up, there was this real fear that, what if the meeting goes off the rails, and what if this happens, and what if that happens, and it was a really great meeting. We had a great turnout, Beckwith Street came up, a lot of other stuff came up. And as such, we've been able to move on with the strategic plan and tweak it a little bit for the next 4 years and move forward. So I get nervous when we start to use this as a coverall for not getting any other business done. Pending anything in the resolution that might come up against the Code of Conduct or Procedural Bylaw, which we would know by the next council meeting when we go to pass it, I'm prepared to support the resolution, because right now, as I see it, we haven't been able to accept a tender. There's no work that's scheduled to be completed. There's no construction plan. Right now, there's nothing. And as we continue to talk about nothing, we're not spending time talking about Confederation Bridge. We're not spending time talking about housing. We're not spending time talking about the things that form the bulk of the strategic plan that sits in front of us. So those are my comments tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to? I do want to just go back to something that Councillor Brennan said. I did not indicate that I didn't want the two gentlemen that have current delegations. I didn't, if I misunderstood you, but I do want them to come, but I do want staff to follow and help the people applying for delegations to follow what was council's instructions on March 4th. That was decided by council, and that should have been what happened, and it didn't. And last meeting, Councillor Dwyer was quite, it became obvious to me that that was the mistake we made. We sent the other two to resolution, but we didn't send that public engagement part. So that will be corrected with this resolution. And the other thing I would like to address is that when you use words like this council is trying to, when Councillor Dwyer uses, or anyone uses, language like we're trying to muzzle anyone, I find that distasteful at the least, because that is not the intent here. The intent, and I think you're well aware of that, that's not the intent. So I would just caution that we be as precise as possible in our language. I think it helps all of us. Yes.
Well, I think we have to consider the uniqueness of the situation. And I'm not aware of any other time I've been on council or any council anywhere that continues to debate a subject on a decision made 19 weeks earlier. That said, we operate in an open and transparent manner. If there is new information to bring forward, then council is willing to hear delegations on new information, but we see no benefit on continuing to hear the same story over and over. I think it's pretty clear that the community is excited about this project, looking forward to the redevelopment of our downtown, and there will be some differences on a disagreement on how parking should be arranged. But in the end, we go back to the decision of January 21st. And the information coming forward at this stage, if there's questions regarding accessibility, which I think is fair, we can get into greater details regarding accessibility. If there's questions regarding pedestrian crossings, we can get into greater details on pedestrian crossings. But to rehash the same thing that we've been discussing for, say, 19 weeks now, I don't see a lot of merit.
Anyone else want to? Okay. So if that being said, I'll look to the clerk as to how do we proceed now to put this resolution forward and ensure that everyone's concerns with the language in it are precise enough that we're not shutting off discussions on other things.
Well, what I'd suggest is if council forwards your proposed resolution, committee forwards a proposed resolution to staff for review with our procedural bylaw and our code of conduct, and to go back at next week's COW with any modifications, any recommended modifications,
And send it to council
the following week.
the following week.
This is a special council next week, which I'm not
Is
sure.
that,
Does that sound
doable?
reasonable?
Okay. So, that is the consensus then at the table? I'm looking at faces? Okay, so that's the action then for, the wording. I'll provide you with the wording I've got here, but I did expect that it would probably need some wordsmithing to make sure it's very precise. Okay, thanks very much. The next priority issue is Municipal Heritage Committee Properties of Interest Report, and Senior Planner Grenke, you have something for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. I'd like to introduce some work that our Municipal Heritage Committee has done, and also introduce the MHC's Deputy Chair, Tony Humphrey, who's going to be speaking to this in a moment. So, under the various powers delegated to municipalities under the Ontario Heritage Act, one of those is the ability to either designate or list properties that are of heritage value in the community. So there's to designate a property, it includes certain legal obligations that pertain to the demolition, and certainly recognize the value of the property and its attributes as defining the growth of the municipality. Another option is to list a property of interest that doesn't contain it has a lot less of a legal requirement. The only the legal requirement, if we were to list a property of interest, is that if there is a proposal to demolish that property, a 60-day pause be given, in which case the municipality can determine whether there's some interest in formally designating it. So council will certainly recall a couple of weeks ago we considered some alterations to a designated property at the old post office. So the Municipal Heritage Committee has identified 8 properties that they feel are worthy of listing, and simply the listing the property puts this the only statutory effect is putting the pause on demolition, but it also reiterates the value the town holds for these lots and these properties, either in their built form or with respect to cultural heritage attributes associated with it. Council will recall that these properties were presented to Committee of the Whole last summer, and the direction that we received was looking for the committee to consult with the affected property owners. The Municipal Heritage Committee did do that. We reached out to all eight of the property owners. We're not obligated to by legislation, but we felt that we agreed that this was something that was it was a good practice, and we gave those owners the opportunity to speak to the Heritage Committee and discuss whether there were any questions about the listing process. 2 of them did reach out to us, and the committee worked with them, and at the end of the day there were no objections received from anybody as far as having these properties listed. So I will. So the recommendation of the Municipal Heritage Committee and of town staff is that the properties be added to the town's registry as properties of interest. And I will now defer to Mr. Humphrey to present on the properties and give some more detail about why the committee feels these properties are worthy of the town's attention. Thank you.
Welcome, Tony.
Hi.
Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thanks for receiving us. Different hat tonight, but I took off my museum hat at the door. So, how do I go? Down? We have 8 properties to list. There is on the current properties, there's a couple missing on there. One of them, of course, is the Pony Trust Bridge. But there are some of the properties that are listed at the present as properties of interest. The Brockville Street recommendation, there's one listed property of interest right now is the Rockland House. We have the Simpson House, the Adam Foster House, the Ryan House, and the John B. Ward House. Some background on them. The Ryan House, the cultural value lies in its association with Matthew Ryan, who started in business as a building contractor in the mid-1870s, became wealthy during the housing boom brought to Smith Falls by the construction of the CPR rail yards. That's how I got wealthy too, by the way. Matthew Ryan built Smith Falls Fire Hall and the Town Hall in Carlton Place. In 1892, he built the public market building on the corner of Market and William Street. In 1893, he contracted to build the enlargement of the St. John the Evangelist Church, and in 1914 built St. Francis de Sales Separate School. From the late 1890s, he operated Ryan's Park, a steeplechase park with a large oval racetrack and grandstand. I hope everybody knows where Ryan's Park was. Architecturally, the house displays several Italianate features, including details around the windows, ornate bracket-style cornices under the eaves, tall, narrow, segmentally arched windows, symmetrically paired on the second floor, and the diametric brick trim. The original tin roof, the veranda, which was added around 1900, is a more Victorian style. Do we have a picture of that house? Oh no, we're starting with the William Simpson. Okay, that's the Matthew Ryan house. The first one we have on here is, I feel, has always been overlooked in Smith Falls. This is a William Simpson house. For those of you who may know or may not know, when we went over to Brockville Street, when we crossed the bridge, we went over the canal bridge, on the left side or the east side, all that land belonged to William Simpson. On the right side, it belonged to Russell Abel Ward. The Simpson house, if I can find it here, it's quite a unique house. The Simpson House, Regency-style villa built around 1840, has cultural heritage due to its association with William Simpson, a prominent and prosperous landed gentleman and one of the founders of Smith Falls. William Simpson has extensive farms and was noted in 1847 for being one of the major progressive farmers in the area. In the 1830s, William Simpson was the single largest landowner in town. With his partner, Abel Russell Ward, he developed Smith Falls as a village and a milling center. Simpson and Ward had a grid map of streets surveyed in 1833, divided up 400 acres between them to sell as village lots, and laid out the extra-wide Beckwith and Main Streets. The villa was built with Tuscan windows, twin verandas, large low French windows, and at the front of the house with curved stone fence. Beneath the outer layer of brick, the walls were constructed on board, piled one on top of another. That is, on the flat. They're 2x10s, all the way up. He owned a sawmill. So, next one is the Adam Foster House. That's 84 Brockville. The cultural heritage value of this property lies in association with Adam Foster, a prominent businessman in Smith Falls during the later decade of the 19th century. Along with his partner John B. Ward, Adam Foster owned and operated several mills on Jason Island. In 1881, a woolen and carding mill were established, as well as a sawmill and a planing mill. Foster and Ward took over Gould's share of the property on Jason Island and modernized the 1868 stone grist mill. By 1895, the roller mill could produce a capacity of 75 barrels of flour a day. Foster had a wharf on Jason Island, where he sold coal and ran a steamboat. Adam Foster developed the town's early system of waterworks. In 1886, he was contracted to put the system of water pipes below the east side of Beckwith Street. I think they're still there, aren't they? Which provided water for the CPRO yards. Over the next 10 years, he expanded the water supply system throughout the major streets of the town. Foster sold his waterworks, which included the pumping station and boiler house in the 3-story brick waterworks building, to the town in 1899. Adam Foster was also the general manager of the electric light company. The combined locks in the heart of Smith Falls is also known as Foster's Lock. Matthew Ryan House, we went there. The John B. Ward House, that's 110 Brockville Street. The cultural heritage in this property lies in association with John B. Ward, a prominent businessman in Smith Falls during the later decade of the 19th century and the son of Abel Russell Ward, one of the founders of Smith Falls. Along with that, his partner Adam Foster, John B. Ward owned and operated several mills in Jason Island. In 1881, woolen and carding mills were established, as well as a sawmill and a planing mill. Foster and Ward took over Gould's share of the property on Jason Island and modernized the 1868 stone grist mill. By 1899, the roller mill could produce. Okay, we visited that. The house built in the 1870s for John B. Ward has architectural heritage value. Neoclassical in design, it's constructed of brown-cut sandstone and originally sat on 5 acres of land. The house features an elegant front facade with a double doorway. Some of the original decorated colored glass around the doorway still exist in the transom and the right panel. Unfortunately, the window on the left-hand side was broken out when they tried to put in the grand piano. I'll just add that part. In 1885, the property was purchased by Dr. R.S. McCallum, who reportedly owned it for the first residential telephone in Smith, owned the first residential phone in Smith Falls, which connected with his surgery. He subdivided the property, which resulted in the creation of Abel Street and Aberdeen Street, which was originally Breckenridge Street. Dr. McCallum also had, he produced medicine on site, very much like pink pills for pale people, and he marketed them extensively. The house at that time was known as the Elms. Okay, our downtown properties. Where are we going to go first? The Washburn Block. I always like this one because it's got the sweet shop in the front lane. Of course, I don't have these in order, excuse me. But I have it somewhere. Ah, there it is. I knew I had it somewhere. The Washburn Block. This block features an Italian commercial 3-story brick building constructed in the mid-19th century, late 1850s to the early 1860s. It was formerly known as the Samuel Garrett Block, housing the Farmers Exchange prior to the building of a public market on the corner of Market and William Street. The cultural heritage of this property lies in it being a fine example of Italian style of architecture, as well as applied to commercial buildings. The facade displays a motif which repeats several times across the building. My favorite part is the repetitive cast iron window cornices lend a fabricated, almost artificial style. The mass-produced architectural elements provide a great quantity of detail which were easily applied around the windows and doors. The building also features a double-tiered brick corbelling and diachromatic queons. Across the street, we're going to go to the house first. I think everybody recognizes this as now the Royal Canadian Legion, which has been extensively modernized. The cultural heritage value of this property lies in its association with Alexander Clark, one of the most prosperous and respected residents of Smith Falls in the mid-1800s. Clark was a member of the first elected municipal council in 1854 and also served as the second Reeve of the Smith Falls. Alexander Clark came to Canada from Scotland in 1929. His business career spanned years from 1840 to 1876. In 1840, he established a wholesale and retail business in partnership with Archibald MacArthur. In 1844, the prestige of Clark's business was raised considerably when he married into the two of the oldest settled families in Smith Falls. Mary Bankier Baitland was the daughter of James Maitland, a well-known magistrate and postmaster at Kilmarnock, and Rebecca Sly. Alexander Clark, a substantial stone building in 17 Becker Street South in the mid-1800s. In 1871, his son James M. Clark built the 3-story corner building known as the Granite Block. I think that one should be next. Yeah, here's the Granite Block, where we have it somewhere. This is, of course, the old Clark and Lewis store. It's a 3-story corner building known as the Granite Block. It was constructed as a hardware store in 1871 for James M. Clark in the French Second Empire architectural style. Also, it's the only known Second Empire structure that we have in Smith Falls. It adjoined the earlier two-story building in Beckwith Street, built in the 1860s, a store and residence for Alexander Clark. J.M. Clark's father. In 1889, the white brick annex was constructed on Main Street side of the corner. In 1890s, a third story was added to the top, and in 1860s, building to create a uniform late Victorian roofline along Beckwith Street. The cultural heritage of this property lies in its French Second Empire architectural features. The style was very popular for the construction of commercial blocks in downtown Smith Falls. The building features a mansard roof punctuated by dormers, an exterior enriched with classical moldings, and details around the doors and large windows, formal symmetrical balance elements. Cultural heritage value also lies in association of the property with several generations of the Clark family. Alexander Clark founded the business in 1840. His son James Ann ran the business from 1876 until 1900. At that time, it was taken over his son John A. Clark, who ran it as a partnership with John H. Lewis under the name of Clark & Lewis Hardware. And the last one, the Rideau Theater. It's got to be on the last page, and it is. The cultural heritage value of this property lies in it being the first theater built in Smith Falls and the only theater to escape demolition. The theater offered live performances and movies. It was built in 1912 by Bert Soper. The Rideau Theater was later renamed the Capitol Theater, showing films for, I almost said adult films, but it's films for adults and children, along with a cartoon and newsreel. In December 1849, the Capitol Theater closed and the equipment was moved to the newly built Soper Theater. Cultural heritage lies in the Rideau Theater being the first flat-iron-shaped building constructed in Smith Falls. Designed by architect McClanahan of Brockville, it had a seating capacity of 850 and was designed to get the shows that went to the bigger audiences in Ottawa, Brockville, and Kingston. There were dressing rooms and baths in the basement, along with an orchestra pit. And the view we're showing here, if you go around the back, down those stairs, you can get into what is the basement, and you can still see the remnants of the orchestra pit in the basement. I got that one out. Okay, these are the properties we're looking to have added. I hope you give them due consideration. And am I taking questions? Yes, Nikki.
Yes. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. Tony, I'm so excited to see this finally come forward. I feel like this project has been such a long time in the works, from the Heritage Conservation District study to the volumes of work that Dorothy Hudson put into researching these properties. And I'm disappointed to see that Dorothy's not here, because I know she's really, really proud that this is coming forward. I have absolutely no problem supporting this. As a past tenant of 102 Brockville Street, I can attest to the beauty that is that building. I actually tried to buy it, but someone scooped it on me. Christopher. But I am very glad to see that all of these are on here. I'm also very glad that we have made it a practice to go through and do pre-consultation with owners, because that is something that is being proposed under Bill 108. So no doubt it will become a statutory part of our process anyways, but we're already on the ball anyways. So congratulations, Tony.
Thank you.
I know you've been driving this for many, many years. So
Yes, there's more to come.
I'm very proud of you. Thank you.
Mayor Panko's next.
Yeah, thanks to Tony and the entire Heritage Committee, and the stories. I mean, that's what really brings these old homes to life, and the relevance to, I guess, the foundation of a community, the builders who really stirred this community and got us going years ago. Yeah, I too support it. Exciting to see these, and the other exciting part, I guess, is to know there's probably so many other untold stories in other homes that we will see coming forward in the future years. So I look forward to seeing more.
Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I sit on the Municipal Heritage Committee, and as Councillor Dwyer said, I think it's time. And each one of these buildings, I mean, some of you in the audience, and certainly all of you, or many of you watching at home, have stories in your heart of being in these buildings at their, heyday. Canadian Tire, or the Clark & Lewis Clark and Lewis had staircases that, as children in my neighborhood, we used to go up one and down the other and then get chased out by the owner because we were being a nuisance. And this one this theater was connected by train. And I have someone in my life that used to come with her husband over on date night, and they'd go to a movie by train and then home again. So there's so many, amazing stories connecting all of these buildings that we need to cherish, and I'm so glad they're being looked after now.
Councilor McGuire.
Thank you, Tony. It's, I think the first time we did that presentation, there was a Beckwith Street talk before, so it's a little deja vu.
I think so.
I think it's a great presentation. Big thanks to the Heritage Committee for putting it together and keep bringing this stuff up. I think it's important to note just a second time that this is just the properties of interest. The only thing this lets us do is it gives us 60 days, I believe, to process a demolition permit. We're not designating these properties, and we're not fully celebrating them to the full potential that the Ontario Heritage Act allows us to do. So I think this is a great first step. I hope as a member of the committee we can really work to get some of the homeowners on board to pursue designation over the next few months, and just not to rest too comfortably, because as much as what we've done tonight is great, as a council, I think we've got a long ways to go to really celebrate our built heritage in Smith Falls. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very
I
much.
have two questions.
Oh, two questions.
I have two questions.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Where is Jason Island?
Jason Island, that's where Useful Motor Sales was.
Oh, okay.
Jason Island is a little island. When you go over the Pony Trust Bridge, which they call Confederation Bridge, that island on the right was called Jason Island.
Okay.
It's basically, most of it, about half of it is a man-made island.
And my second question is, what is a Quoin? Q-U-O-I-N.
Quine.
I don't even know how to pronounce it.
That's just things up at the top.
No, the coining is bracketing down the side of a building on the corner.
Oh.
So you'll see them, they're overlaid bricks, so that one's short, one's long. That's referred to as coins.
She went to university for
Did
this.
you,
Yeah.
did you have the answer to that,
No, I
Tony?
didn't.
Okay. Thanks very much. That's, Lorraine. Councillor Allen.
No, I was just going to add that that walking tour that our economic development is working on will explain we're unique. That particular feature is unique to our town, and many of our buildings have it. And so that's one of the reasons you should go on our walking tour.
Thanks very much
Thank you.
for coming, Tony. Next, communication strategy report by our economic development, Jennifer Miller.
Thank you. In the fall of last year, Council supported the staff recommendation to commission a marketing and communications strategy, with key deliverables being an audit of existing external communication pieces, a marketing and communications strategy, and a work plan with step-by-step action items to address recommendations in the strategy. The work was completed this spring by Dragonfly Communications and Marketing, and the strategy is in front of you today. It highlights the strength of the town's rebranding work, as well, which can be better incorporated. It speaks to ways in which that can be better incorporated into our day-to-day communication, the website, and marketing initiatives. So the key message throughout the strategy, the audit, and the work plan was the need for consistent messaging and dedicated resources to implement the recommendations. The report highlighted the need for improved use of social media, updates to the website, and a strategy to develop an effective content strategy. So when the RFQ was released, our department set aside $20,000 in order to address the outcomes of the strategy. Now that the strategy is in hand, we're recommending that we hire a part-time contract communications coordinator to implement the recommendations. This would be a contract role for the balance of 2019, and the position would be reviewed as part of the Economic Development and Tourism Sustainability Strategy, that's a mouthful, review in the fall, and that'll be in advance of our preparations for the 2020 budget. So it's the staff's recommendation tonight that council endorse the marketing and communications strategy as presented, as well as support the proposed implementation of a contract role to address the recommendations outlined in the strategy.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. I've read the report, and it's great because I think it's a distinct departure from where we've been in recent years, which is really exciting. I wonder how much involvement you had in actually crafting the recommendations, or if it was mostly just provided by Dragonfly, you reviewed it, and you were happy with what was produced.
So there were staff and stakeholder surveys that were done in order to produce the strategy, and so certainly, I was one of the staff that was involved with that, and we talked extensively about some of the challenges with our communications and where we were going, but they did a lot of the legwork in terms of auditing it externally, and that's how they came up with the recommendations.
Okay, so my final point is just to confirm that you are happy with what's in here.
Very happy.
Very happy?
Yes.
Okay, and are there any, besides the staffing complement, are there any other recommendations in here that you anticipate are going to have budgetary impacts in 2020?
In 2020, I think we will have had a chance to look at the marketing budget that we have currently for tourism and economic development, and I hope that will kind of redirect our work in a more strategic and streamlined way.
Okay.
And we'll see what the service review says, but I think what this points out is that we're currently under-resourced when it comes to having a key point person for communications. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that at all. Have you contemplated the likelihood of securing a quality hire if it's a 6-month contract position?
Might be challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be challenging, and I guess our plan B would be to look at contracting out. I'd like to give it a try because I think that the advantage is having somebody in-house on a mostly daily basis, so that when issues arise, we can respond to them appropriately and in a timely fashion. So it is my first choice to hire, but
I think my point was more, I'd rather see you hire a 1-year contract than a 6-month contract, and I know that has budget implications into next year.
Yep.
But to secure somebody who's a quality coordinator and really hit the ground running, my sense would be that we'd be more successful to offer something a little bit more permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Brennan and then Mayor Panko.
Thanks, Jennifer. I read it quickly this afternoon. I just got back, but I certainly support any efforts. It's timely that we look at our communications. I love this quote from George Bernard Shaw: "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place." The other notion, and we spoke earlier about it, was I've often thought that as part of our communications with the taxpayer, it might be beneficial, and maybe something that this person can do is it's just a simple press release after a council meeting to get clarity to what went on. And I know that my friends in the press are going, yes, we want that. Makes our job a little easier. But I think the county does it, and other municipalities do a quick update to the media after a meeting. So maybe that's something we can look at. But yeah, that's a great report from what I can remember reading, and congratulations on it.
Mayor Panko?
Thanks, Jennifer, and to Dragonfly for the work they did in putting this together. And I think those of us who have been over here for years would certainly agree that there has been some deficiency in communication and gaps in communication. And when people are trying to do it off the side of their desk, it's hard to do it as effectively and comprehensively as what we would like to see. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a great step forward to have someone who's going to be that point person. Do we have a strategy to ensure that once a person's on board, that all data and details are sort of forwarded to one place for communication?
That'll have to be developed in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Yep. And certainly from Councillor Brennan's comments, certainly, I mean, at County Council, there's sort of ongoing live tweets and things like that are conducive to that ongoing communication. And certainly in the age of social media, ensuring that we have constant information out there, the right information out there, and ensuring that people know where to go for the answers. And so it's a big step forward, and thanks for all the hard work.
And Councillor McKenna.
Thanks, Jennifer. I really enjoyed the document. It's a good plan. It's very difficult to implement something like this and introducing a new culture, but without a plan, it's impossible to implement it. So it's great to have it. I was also pleased to see that we've leveraged the town's message, particularly around tourism, with the county's messages, and you can take advantage of, and others in our neighborhood, that how we can link into their messages, and everyone's money spent then goes that much farther. So
Exactly.
I thought that was very creative. Thank you.
Councillor McGuire.
Thank you. Thanks for presenting the plan. It's great to see a really detailed look at this kind of stuff, because I think everybody at one time or another has a hard time, figuring out what's going on at town as much as involved as you can be. I'm wondering for the website, there's a lot of high-level stuff in here. For the user at home, how will following the recommendations in this study improve the user experience on the website and affect their ability to find what they need when they're on there?
So in order to develop this strategy, Dragonfly conducted a website audit, and we got 8 pages of corrections and suggestions to make on that website. So that will be high on the list of priorities for this coordinator.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
No, I just want to give my accolades as well. I think this is a great document, and we need this. But I also want to compliment your department on the print that we're putting out now too. It's high quality, and it's everywhere. Which people are saying to me, "Oh, I just read that such and such in your little book," and so it's super.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, we have a
I think
great
it's
team.
something that we really need. That's great.
And I will add my gratefulness, because I have long advocated for having a formal strategy everywhere I've gone, but certainly it's as much needed at the municipal level as it is even in private industry. So I am thrilled to see that we have a plan for communicating. And thank you.
Thank you.
So we will bring forward a bylaw to adopt that
Thank you.
recommendation.
Great.
That was what you were looking for, wasn't it, Jennifer? Okay. Again, Senior Planner Granke, you have a summary of planning changes through Bill 108 Report 2019-076, and I believe Councillor McGuire declared it a conflict.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems every couple of years there's municipal planners across the province are presenting significant changes to the planning and growth-related legislative framework across Ontario. So I'm presenting just a summary of what Bill 108 is proposing to do. As Council will recall, the province has undertaken a housing looking at undertaking a housing strategy that was we provided some feedback to the ministry earlier on in the winter, and to implement that they've undertaken an omnibus, presented Bill 108, which is sort of an omnibus legislation that proposes to amend 13 different acts, including the Planning Act and many others. And a lot of these have some degree of impact on municipal operations. So the bill, of course, has a variety of impacts. The Conservation Authorities Act, the Municipal Heritage Act, Endangered Species Act, and several others that are being looked at. So the full impact of many of the proposed Bill 108 amendments can only really be known and assessed when implementation details, as outlined in regulations, become available. These aren't yet, so it's impossible to know the overall impact of some of them. Unfortunately, municipalities were not given as a lot of time to provide feedback to the ministry on this. We were provided only about a month. and the clerk's office has received about a dozen or so, including today, several other resolutions from other municipalities across the province, essentially asking for more time and expressing some concerns with the legislation as presented. So that the wording in those resolutions, which has been fairly consistent from what we've received, is appended to this report, and certainly council has the option to consider that resolution or something very similar to it. So I'm focusing more so on the changes to the planning related legislation that we're looking at. So just to quickly go through the changes under the Planning Act, one of the new ones is that municipalities and official plans will soon have to contain policies permitting additional residential units within ancillary buildings that are ancillary to residential to houses. So laneway housing, those sorts of outbuildings and garages. So providing a little bit more ability to incorporate affordable housing. That's what they're looking to do here. I think in practice that might, I don't have a significant concern with that. I think in practice we're going to be constrained to some extent by parking requirements. We certainly don't have a lot of space on existing lots. Another proposed change is with respect to inclusionary zoning, and from my reading of the proposed legislation, they're looking at directing inclusionary zoning to areas around major transit stations, which is certainly not something that would apply in Smith Falls. So inclusionary zoning is a tool that became available to municipalities over the last year and a half, roughly, that allows us to designate a certain amount of new residential units to be affordable. So certainly there's some rationale to encouraging that around transit stations. My concern, of course, is are we removing that? It looks like that tool may be removed from our toolbox as we embark on our own housing strategy. Certainly, the minister can prescribe that elsewhere, but that's a little bit of a concern. Another change that's being proposed is a community benefits charge that's intended to consolidate a number of sections in the Planning Act, including density for housing, some parkland dedication, and a few others. And that's intended to provide a mechanism, if we were to adopt a strategy along those lines, to charge for growth-related infrastructure or growth-related to charge for growth-related impacts on certain services, recreation, and so on. Unfortunately, the calculation and the methodology by these charges, the formulas, caps and fees, these have not been prescribed, and it's expected these details will follow in regulation. However, we don't really have much of a sense from what I can see as to how this is going to impact us, and it's tied to the percentage and the value of the land. So community charge funds would also be allocated into a special account, and municipalities would need to spend a minimum 60% of the cash that's raised in that account throughout that year. And I think the intent of that is just to make sure that we're not just continuing to build up a reserve, but that we're also spending it, and that makes sense. It does increase, of course, the administrative burden on us. Changes to appeals, that's another significant change, and in many cases we're reverting back to a system that we had before Bill 108, Bill 139, which created the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal and reformed how we do appeals. So the name, the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, will remain. However, a lot of the changes that are being, a lot of the old OMB rules are coming back. So, for instance, with respect to council's decision, say if we were to not approve a zoning application because the council is of the view that it was not a responsible development for the municipality, the bar to overturn that decision on appeal is fairly high. It's not simply a matter of which which planning outcome do we prefer more, which was how the OMB would typically rule, but now the onus would be on the appellant to demonstrate that we incorrectly applied our official plan and the provincial policy statement. Another change is the tribunal would once again be empowered to approve or refuse planning applications, so they can actually make the decision on an appeal that's filed. So under the previous legislation that's been in effect for the last year or so, the tribunal would not actually make the decision, but if they felt that we were wrong, they would send it back to us for reconsideration. We can make another decision, and if need be, then it can get appealed. But the intent was to ensure that the ultimate decision-making authority was with the municipality. So it looks like that's getting pulled back a little bit, and certainly the concern I've been hearing from other municipalities is that this potentially has the effect of removing our overall decision-making powers and creating a little bit more unpredictability in the overall process. In general, timelines are being shortened as well. There's decision timelines for official plan amendment subdivision applications are being cut significantly. So certainly the intent is to make planning files move through the system faster, and certainly I can appreciate the rationale for that. The recourse, of course, is there would be if we don't make a decision in time, then there's the ability for an appeal. The concern is some of these changes may increase the overall number of appeals that we'd be facing, which may actually increase the overall cost to the municipality on defending our decisions to the LPAT. Development charges are another significant planning tool that's being looked at closely through this legislation. Of course, we don't have DCs in effect in Smith Falls right now, so none of these changes directly affect us. However, if we were to implement development charges in the future, there's a number of the proposed changes would affect how and when the charges are calculated and collected. In general, charges would be collected now at the time of they would be collected at the time of occupancy, and the calculation of the charges would occur at the time of the zoning or site plan approval, as opposed to the issuance of a building permit. So that moves the collection back a little bit. So one effect, of course, is it could remove a little bit of the incentive for builders to build as soon as they obtain planning approval quite quickly, and now DCs would be payable in 6 annual installments instead of at once. So it would would establish a bit of an administrative burden on the municipality if this were to go through as proposed. So there's also a number of changes to other legislation. Certainly the Ontario Heritage Act, they're looking at increasing or building in some timelines, and also building in through prescribed regulations some principles that municipalities would need to look at prior to making a decision under the Heritage Act. The concern that I have there is that without knowing what those principles are, it's difficult for us to provide a meaningful comment on the effect. So the Municipal Heritage Committee has provided feedback to the ministry on these changes, and certainly I can provide that to council if anyone's looking at, if anybody would like that. And the Conservation Authority is they're looking at changing that to require that CAs focus more on what they define as the core mandates, and provisions for accommodating memorandums of understanding for contracted services would apply. There may be an increase in cost to municipalities. We don't know yet. So all in all, I think there's a broad range of changes here. Some of them I think are intriguing and certainly quite interesting and well worth considering. Some I have concerns with the municipality's overall ability to ensure that we uphold our official plan and when we conduct business and make our decisions. And I think a lot of them we simply don't know what the overall effect would be. Unfortunately, municipalities and as well as professional associations, the finance officials, the Ontario Professional Planners Institute and a lot of other organizations have spent some time working with this legislation. However, it's difficult to really assess what the overall impacts are going to be. So certainly that would be my primary concern, and if council were looking at adopting the resolution that was provided there, I think that's well worth considering, certainly to give us the opportunity to have a broader feedback and also to provide some feedback prior to regulations coming in, so we know what these changes are going to mean and give us the opportunity to respond. But at this point, the report is presented for council's information, and I welcome any discussion.
Councillor Dwyer?
Thank you. I've been looking forward to commenting on this. Nothing gets me excited like planning stuff. It really doesn't. You know what? I'm really unsurprised by this legislation because I feel like More Homes, More Choices delivers exactly what Ford promised. He promised he was going to open up the Greenbelt, and when he was told that that wasn't going to happen, he passed amendments through this omnibus bill to allow for development in the Greenbelt inadvertently. He's allowing the minister's office to come in and dictate what your zoning bylaw will say through the use of community, what are they calling them now? The old DPS system? Community something?
Community planning permit.
Yeah. He's restoring the authority to make decisions to the Ontario Municipal Board, regardless of whether or not it's called LPAT or not. He is re-permitting de novo hearings. This is taking away all of the autonomy of local municipalities to make decisions. There are some pieces in here that I don't think are all bad. I really don't. There are some advancements, particularly around Terrion home warranties that are very positive. A lot of the changes around the Municipal Heritage Act bring great strength and accountability to what municipalities do. But I think the crux of the position that has been circulated to us is that there needs to be more time, because this omnibus bill makes changes to, 13, 15 pieces of legislation. The one I just caught while you were speaking is changes to the cannabis bill. And I don't even know what they are. I don't know what they are because the province really hasn't told us in a fashion that's open and transparent. So I would really like to see the council pass a resolution responding, seeking more time for public consultation, because this is insufficient. I do worry on, Carl, on your note about the accessory units in additional ancillary structures. I see this as the potential to triple the density of town without much oversight on council's behalf. And while your report references the fact that in a lot of areas this will be limited by parking requirements, I don't know that it will, because when the requirements for accessory structures, or accessory units rather, came out originally, they dramatically changed the way parking was going to be dealt with to permit them. Including that you only had to have one space per unit and that they could be permitted in tandem. So what that means is that where you would have a driveway, you could now park all your 3 cars in it. No problem.
So could I suggest then that, because you obviously are excited by planning, that you want to go ahead with this resolution as it's attached?
No, I wouldn't go ahead with it as attached, and this becomes my concern, is that our commenting deadline is tomorrow. I was hoping that we'd have more of a tailored recommendation from staff to actually take forward. So I don't know what council does, because I worry that the language that's used in these generic resolutions, I don't think is to our favor, but I do want to see us pass something.
Okay, first, Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, the third reading's tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
So, and one document I don't know if you referred to it, was AMO's position on these things, and mostly on each of the issues that you spoke to, they're keeping their finger on it, and there's good and bad and that sort of thing. Your concerns and the concerns of my friend beside me can or cannot be alleviated through regs. regulations. Yeah, the regulations that are to come forward after. Right?
Okay, can we just have Carl answer that then?
They may, but at this point, we don't know, and I think that's the challenge that we simply cannot assess the overall impact to the municipality when a lot of the key implementation details are unknown at this point.
Yeah, just one more thing, Madam Chair, from me. With the suggested resolution that it came from Grey County, I think is a little strong. And I think for me, I would prefer something that would say we look forward to having more input into the regulations as they come forward. And in fact, I have a little experience, but sometimes these things take a long time to come forward, like a year. So in that case, you know, an AMO conference comes up in the summer, and that's a delegation opportunity. A resolution asking for input on the regs is appropriate, I think, and then that way we can get on the record and without sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If it can be a good piece of legislation with input from municipalities all over Ontario, then we should work with them rather than say we just strictly oppose this as it's written.
And Councillor Allen next.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Brennan, and could we not do that in a fax if we get it in tomorrow? Because at the very least, I mean, the Heritage Committee has spent, well, one very long meeting, and then it was wordsmithed and sent out to us, and we agreed with it, and that's just one tiny aspect of this. So I think, like, I agree with my colleagues, I think we need time, and we need to feel like we're being consulted, because these are very important issues.
And Senior Planner Grenke, did you have some more information?
Certainly, I think the challenge that we're looking at is the Environmental Bill of Rights established a commenting deadline of June 1st, and yet third reading has always been outlined as June 4th. So it's the challenge I think we have is how much of an opportunity is there between then and third reading to have that final say. I think if we're going to provide input, my recommendation is we do it now if possible. A lot of these resolutions, however worded, are being sent to every MPP as well as ministers. And I think what I'm hearing from council is not necessarily that council is strongly opposed, but council wants more time and more information. So certainly a resolution, if council would like to do that, can be worded accordingly.
So Mayor Panko, then Councillor McKenna, then CAO Morris.
Yeah, I think we hear there's good and there's some things not so good in here, and the time for, my preference really is we ask the minister, whom is a resident not too far from here, to pause any decision on this until the fall session. And knowing that the House rises, I think, the end of this week, and there's really no time for us to provide adequate input. So if they simply would ask for that pause until the fall session, providing all municipalities an opportunity for adequate input into the details of Bill 108.
And Councillor McKenna?
Just so I'm clear, Mayor Panko, you're suggesting that council ask you to correspond that? Like, that would have to be to actually postpone the legislation, or?
Yeah, I guess postpone, if postpone the third reading.
Oh, okay.
And until the fall session to allow for proper input and consultation with municipalities.
I think it's a great idea. It's a little late, but and then my other question, just if I could.
Sir.
Just there's so much in here. There's so much change. We don't have time to absorb this. Off-road vehicles on all Ontario streets without any say by municipalities, like We know that's a different bill. And then the 65% or 60% we have to spend each year on the community benefits charge, small municipalities are at a disadvantage. We may have a few hundred or a couple $1,000s gained in any given year. Your community is going to benefit that much if you're unable to accumulate something and then have one great big. So bigger cities will benefit from that, but smaller rural municipalities, we won't accumulate enough to really benefit the community. I mean, there's so much here. I think we, hopefully, as Councillor Brennan suggests, that we can have more input into the regulations and through our partners at AMO do something with a little more stronger voice.
And CAO Morris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my points were largely covered. I think a letter, given the closing window of opportunity, is probably in order. That would allow staff to come back with a resolution if it passes at third reading. I can tell you there's a lot of lobbying effort underway right now by larger municipalities and AMO to pump the brakes on this one, so to speak. So my suggestion would echo the mayor's. Let's send Mr. Clark a letter. If it passes at third reading, we can come back with a resolution that reflects Councillor Brennan's idea of being constructive about the regulations.
And so is council agreeable to that suggestion of the CAOs? A letter, yes. And that's the action going forward. Thank you. Anything else? We have, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Brown.
Sorry, as a sidebar note, I wonder if it wouldn't be worthwhile, and it's kind of in relation to Bill 108, but I wonder if it wouldn't be worthwhile to extend an invitation to MP Randy Hillier to come and give us a bit of a legislative update on what's going on at the Hill. I know Mr. Hillier is not exactly super tuned in to the inside gossip, but he attended, I know he's been making the rounds, and he attended a session at Mississippi Mills a couple weeks ago, and he did have some insight to provide on some of the things that are in motion, and I think it would be wise to perhaps extend him an invitation to speak here and update us as well.
Are there any objections to that? I think that would be a great idea, and so can we have staff extend that invitation? Okay, great. Okay, there being nothing else, thank you, Carl. Our last one is with Director Costello, Regulate Smoking and Vaping in Public Places and Enclosed Workplaces Report 2019-76.
Thank you. This shouldn't be long. This is simply bringing forward the bylaw that we brought forward, or the proposed bylaw we brought forward at the last regular committee of the whole. At that time, Councillor McKenna asked some additional questions about the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. So what I've done is I've attached kind of the guide that the province has put out. And it is entitled, Where You Can't Smoke or Vape in Ontario. Specifically, his question was regarding residential hospices and whether it would be permitted there. So we did some research, and it is permitted in what they call a controlled area, that being cannabis. Tobacco wouldn't be permitted. But the guide does kind of give a lowdown on where smoking and vaping can take place. So that was just an information item I wanted to bring forward. If council approves the bylaw as presented, I'm proposing that it be adopted at the next regular council meeting, which is June 17th, which would give us about a 2-week window to do some educational campaigning through social media and our website.
Any feedback or questions from council? Yes, Councillor McKenna?
I'm supportive of this going forward as is, and would encourage our friends who are developing a hospice, if and when they're ready, because we're not even sure they're interested in developing that room, that at that time they could come forward and have a discussion. And if it was the will of the council of the day, whenever that is, to adapt it, then they could adapt it at that time. But it is a possibility, and it's something that we'll make sure that the hospice organizers know about. But at this time, I would support this going forward as is.
Thank you.
And I see nodding heads that council, you have your support.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. I need a motion to adjourn from Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McGuire. All in favor? We'll be back in 5 minutes for council.
Good evening. Welcome to this regular meeting of Smith Falls Town Council for Monday, June 3rd. We got a full council in-house tonight. I have no announcements. I will ask for disclosure of monetary interest. I hear none. We have no delegations. Adoption of minutes of Councillor Brennan, please.
Yes. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that the minutes of the May 6, 2019 and May 21st, 2019 committee council meetings be approved as circulated.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor McGuire. The minutes of the May 6, 2019 and May 21st, 2019 meetings, council meetings be approved as circulated. All in favor? Carried. Reports. Councillor Allen?
I'm not going to do extensive report, but I would like to just thank my colleagues for allowing the three of us went to a conference, Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference, which I think is always very worthwhile. I attended a cannabis workshop, and I'm going to shout out to our Municipal Drug Strategy Committee, because one of the things the speaker said is that we really are in a crisis, and the first thing a municipality should be working on and trying to get together and create is a Municipal Drug Strategy Committee. So I was sitting there thinking, we have had one for 6 years. I felt very good about that. And I chatted with the speaker, and it was just a very worthwhile conference, and I know my colleagues enjoyed it as well, but I appreciate being able to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna?
Nothing to report, Your Worship.
Councillor Alford? Working my way around here, Councillor Dwyer.
I do. It's my first report, I think. Yes, I will echo what Councillor Allen said about giving thanks for being fortunate enough to go to FCM. We were all blessed, and I think we all attended the 3 sessions by the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau and Mr. Andrew Scheer and Mr. Jagmeet Singh to hear their position. Pardon me?
I saw Elizabeth May too.
Oh, did you see Elizabeth May? Oh, I missed her. But to hear their position leading into the election, and I think I was equally inspired by all of the presentations. As a diehard Liberal, and my mother will kill me, I was remarkably impressed by Andrew Scheer, and it left me with a great deal of faith in this federal election. It really did. I think heading into this, I had some serious reservations, and after having listened to them speak about municipal issues, I actually felt a lot better. So it was a fantastic opportunity. I've never seen so many blacked out Suburbans in my life, and I accidentally took a wrong turn down a corridor full of Secret Service, but I lived to tell a tale. I do want to touch on one session that I went to. There was so much to see and do, but the last session I went to on Saturday was about the future of plastics, and it was absolutely fascinating. And the one point that it really drove home was that as a consumer, it is next to impossible to reduce your consumption of plastics, because plastic has become such an integral part of our lives. It's in everything from single-use plastics, which is easy enough to ban as municipalities, but everything from cigarette butts, which I had no idea were 60% plastic, to microplastics that come off your clothing when you wash it repeatedly in your washing machine, the solution of which would be to put a filter on your washing machine, and then again in your municipal treatment system. It did kind of leave me with the heebie-jeebies when the councillor Peter Fry from Vancouver was talking about the fact that the concern is not about microplastic anymore. They can deal with microplastic. Now the concern is about nanoplastic, and the fact that nanoplastic can actually become embedded in flesh and biological systems, and is changing the physical compensation of living matter. A gentleman who was speaking, and I forget his name, from Recycle Quebec, was talking about the fact that by biomass in 50 years, there will be more plastic in the world's oceans than organic life. That's shocking. It really drove home the fact that we as municipalities are the agents of change, and that we need to start getting very proactive and prohibitive around making decisions on behalf of the consumer. And I know that this is something that CAO Morris has been involved in the past, particularly around plastic diversion. And the last point I will make is that there was the mayor of Lachine, Quebec, was speaking about the fact that really what they're finding with the closure of Asian markets is that there is virtually no market for dirty plastic. So recyclers only want clean plastic, which is not what you'd anticipate, washing out your bottles before you put them in the recycling. It's about properly separated and sorted plastics. So ensuring that when you recycle a plastic bottle, this is the only type of plastic bottle in that load. Otherwise, the manufacturers who are taking it back will not take it. So she talked about the fact that really the only way to deal with that is through bottle deposits and returns, so that when you know that you're collecting Pepsi Cola bottles, they are all 100% the same plastic. And I think that's a great lesson for Ontario to learn. So, I mean, like I said, my takeaways were this cannot be done by the consumer. The municipality has a role to play, but to some degree, this comes from a much higher power, which is probably the federal government. And from our standpoint, we can influence that by being lobbyists. So, scary, but fascinating. And I won't get into the other presentations that I went to, but I will say I did go to one on 5G networks, hoping to better understand what on earth a 5G network is, and I can't say I left with any better understanding. It's a very complex beast, and I get that we should support it wherever possible, but I have no idea what a 5G network is. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor McGuire?
Thank you, Your Worship. Last Thursday, the Police Services Board met for our monthly meeting, and we had some good news regarding the mental health nurse. As you may know, that came down to the wire with the funding cut from the province, but luckily the police service was able to work with the local LHIN to secure some of the $174 million worth of mental health funding that was announced by the province recently. So that position will continue, and it will continue to 2020, and the police service is continuing to look for sustainable sources to fund that program into the future. So some good news coming out of the Police Services Board.
Great, thank you. Councillor Brennan?
I'll just give my impressions of the conference, and as a lifelong conservative, I was most impressed. I was impressed with Andrew for sure, from what he had to say, but probably the best speaker was the NDP leader. He did a great job, and one of the anecdotes he gave it struck me, and he said that he got some advice from an 80-year-old way. If the federal government disappeared, people would notice maybe in a week or so. If the provincial government disappeared, it may take 3 or 4 days. If a municipal government disappeared, they'd know within hours. And that just that was a theme that I got from all of them, and from the people that I met there. That and they each had a commitment for different reasons, but that they would have an open communication with municipal government, municipal associations, FCM, and the other part of it was programming and funding should not be year to year, term to term. It should be something that we can count on, and I think that's something that AMO and other organizations that we're a part of are striving for. And other than that, we had a great dinner last night. We had dinner with the mayor of Oakville, and prior to that, I had a great conversation with the president of AMO, and sung the praises of our town, and talked a lot about canopy growth, and gave him a pin, and he said I really learned something. So I look forward to meeting him again. He's the mayor of Parry Sound, I believe. So great conference, and I would encourage my colleagues to take a turn at it next year. I think it's in Toronto, but any of those conferences are very beneficial as elected officials.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Sounds like all of you at FCM come back with some great experience. Thank you for taking the time to do so. Councillor Alford, you had something you missed?
No, I just want to make an observation that I think that is the very first time that I've heard people declare their political affiliations at this municipal table.
Proud of it.
Congratulations. We've moved past that.
You checked out the door, right? Yeah.
Bring it back.
A few reports myself. May 23rd, I had the opportunity to address a group representing the Public Policy Forum. I mean, about 24 different mid to high level federal bureaucrats who were in town for a couple of days really to get a great understanding of this evolutionary change regarding cannabis. They had some time at Canopy Growth, and then an opportunity to talk about the revitalization of our community and how it relates to canopy growth. So they had great interest. They had a great experience while they're here. They stayed at the Best Western when they were in town, enjoyed the restaurants in their community. So they had great memories of Smiths Falls. Just short recognition. Last Monday, of course, we all left pretty quickly. We had to get out to the Citizens of the Year banquet. I want to say thank you to everybody on council as well as the staff who were present. And to my recollection, it was the first time that all members of council were at the banquet. And to get just a brief recognition to our Citizens of the Year, Karen Hallinan, who's done so much work for so many groups and organizations for so many years, largely unnoticed. So it was great to see that recognition for Karen. On the 28th, I had a hospital board meeting. Nothing really to report from that. And just a brief note, Paddle Fest on the weekend. So I had the opportunity to go shoulder to shoulder with Councillor McGuire as well as a number of other with town staff. Great event. There was 17s, I think it was, in the 200-meter race, Voyageur Canoe Race. We won our first two heats fairly well, and unfortunately we came a short second, a second and a half difference to the big burly moving guys from Will's transfer, and our team was much more gender neutral. And probably a little bit older for the most part, but we had a very commendable effort, and if they hadn't cut us off at the last second, tried to take us out, I think we probably would have beat them. But it was great to see a lot of healthy competition, a lot of participation, a lot of fun, and turned out to be a great day for everybody involved. That's it for my reports. We have some bylaws this evening. Our first one is with Councillor Dwyer, please.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, bylaw 10043-2019, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls at its meeting held on the 6th and 21st day of May 2019, be received and read a first time and taken and read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, seconded by Councillor McGuire, bylaw 10043-2019. The bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls at its meetings held on the 6th and 21st days of May 2019 be received by the first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Discussion, Councillor Dwyer?
This is an administrative bylaw that happens at the first council session every month.
Okay, third reading, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, bylaw 10043-2019, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls at its meetings held on the 6th and 21st day of May 2019, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10043-2019.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, seconded by Councillor McGuire, bylaw 10043-2019, that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls at its meetings held on the 6th and 21st days of May 2019. Be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10043-2019. All in favor? Carried. Councillor McGuire, you're up next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brennan, that a bylaw to authorize an exemption to bylaw 9980-2018, being a bylaw to adopt a temporary road closure and street toll policy to allow an alternate location for the Special Olympics street toll, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McGuire, seconded by Councillor Brennan, bylaw 10044-2019, that a bylaw to authorize an exemption to bylaw 9980-2018, being a bylaw to adopt a temporary road closure and street toll policy to allow an alternate location for the Special Olympics street toll, be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Discussion, Councillor McGuire?
This is the usual location for the Special Olympics street toll. Since they've got the support of the police, they've got the necessary safety features with lights and signs for cars passing through. And I'd encourage everybody to put some change in the car and take a drive through the Cornelia Street underpass Friday afternoon, June 7th.
Thank you. They also take paper money for those who don't have coins.
Yeah, big
Third reading, please.
big spenders. All right, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Brennan that bylaw to authorize an exemption to bylaw 9980-2018, being a bylaw to adopt a temporary road closure and street toll policy to allow an alternate location for the Special Olympic street toll, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10,044-2019.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McGuire, second by Councillor Brennan. Bylaw 10044-2019, that a bylaw to authorize an exemption to bylaw 9980-2018, being a bylaw to adopt a temporary road closure and street toll policy to allow an alternate location for the Special Olympic street toll, be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10044-2019. All in favor? Carried. Councillor McKenna, you've got the next bylaw?
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Allen, bylaw 10045-2019, that a bylaw to establish tax rates and policies for the purpose of raising the general municipal revenues on the year 2019 and to impose the final 2019 tax levy on all properties within the town of Smiths Falls be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McKenna, second by Councillor Allen, bylaw 10045-2019, the bylaw to establish tax rates and policies for the purposes of raising the general municipal revenues for the year 2019 and to impose the final 2019 tax levy on all properties within the town of Smiths Falls be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Discussion, Councillor McKenna?
Your Worship, this is an annual bylaw that actually establishes the tax rate for the 2009 for this fiscal year, and also formalizes the taxation revenue for the municipality.
Thank you. Is there, Councillor McGuire, you have another comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that the word raising is raising in the sense of collection. The tax rate is accounting for inflation, but there is no raising of the tax rate.
There's a modest increase in the tax rate, and combined with the average increase in assessment would equal the rate of inflation. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thanks. Any further comment? Third reading, please.
That a bylaw to establish tax rates, and of course moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Allen, that a bylaw to establish tax rates and policies for the purpose of raising the general municipal revenues on the year 2019 and to impose the final 2019 tax levy on all properties within the town of Smiths Falls be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10045-2019.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McKenna, second by Councillor Allen, bylaw 10045-2019. The bylaw to establish tax rates and policies for the purposes of raising the general municipal revenues on the year 2019 and to impose the final 2019 tax levy on all properties within the town of Smiths Falls be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10045-2019. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Brennan, you have our final bylaw.
I do.
No, I missed me.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Allen. My mistake.
Okay. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McKenna, bylaw 10046-2019, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a community improvement plan funding agreement with Pat Maloney respecting the property known as 20 Russell Street East be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McKenna. Bylaw 10046-2019, the bylaw to authorize execution of a community improvement plan funding agreement with Pat Maloney respecting the property known as 20 Russell Street East be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Discussion, Councillor Allen?
Yes, most of us know this building as, it used to be Rideau Candyland, and this has been purchased by Pat Maloney, and he's going to have it, the front part of it's going to be a bar, and the back part is going to be a music area where you can stand and listen to your music and also have your refreshments. And he has requested this because he wants to restore the building and improve the facade, as well as I'll read he's been granted through this program. This program, and I think I've said this many times, is promoting and focusing public and private sector investments on maintaining, rehabilitating, and redeveloping our downtown buildings and making things better for our town. So he was given $6,520 in the form of a facade and landscape improvement grant. That's under Program 1. $20,000 in the form of the building restoration, renovation, and improvement grant in Program 2, and a refund representing 75% of the building permit application in Program 3. And we wish him every success at Bowie's Bar.
Thank you. Any further commentary? Third reading, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McKenna, bylaw 10046, 2019, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a community improvement plan funding agreement with Pat Maloney respecting the property known as 20 Russell Street East be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10046, 2019.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McKenna, bylaw 10046-2019, that a bylaw to authorize execution of a community improvement plan funding agreement with Pat Maloney respecting the property known as 20 Russell Street East be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10046-2019. All in favor? Carried. Now, Councillor Brennan, it's your turn.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that a bylaw to adopt a marketing and communication strategy for the town of Smith Falls be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor McGuire, bylaw 10047-2019, that a bylaw to adopt a marketing and communication strategy for the town of Smith Falls be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carried. Discussion, Councillor Brennan?
Our Director of Economic Development, Jennifer Miller, presented this to us this evening, and it's a comprehensive plan. It's going to improve not only our marketing of our town outside the town, but our communications with our taxpayers. So I wholly support it along with my colleagues, and it's a great thing.
Further commentary? Third reading, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that a bylaw to adopt a marketing and communication strategy for the town of Smith Falls be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 147, 2019.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, second by Councillor McGuire, bylaw 10047-2019. The bylaw to adopt a marketing and communication strategy for the town of Smith Falls be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10047-2019. All in favor? Carried. And Councillor Brennan, you're up next with the first motion.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls award Phase 2 Parking Management and Regulation Study to J.L. Richards Consulting Engineers in the amount of $30,954.37, including HST, and further that the Mayor and the Clerk be authorized to execute necessary contract agreements.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councillor Brennan?
This stemmed from our meeting last week, and Phase 2 of the parking study will look at parking management, i.e. payment methods, if there's payment, and revenue potential or not. The first phase looked at capacity, and this is the next phase.
Any further commentary?
I'll just add something else.
Sure.
Part of the contract will be engagement with local businesses and also hopefully the public.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, second by Councillor McGuire, Phase 2 Parking Management and Regulation Study. The Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls award Phase 2 Parking Management and Regulation Study to J.L. Richards Consulting Engineers in the amount of $30,954.37, including HST, and further the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to execute the necessary contract agreements. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Alfred, your next motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McKenna, that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls award tender 19 PW-009-2019 pavement marking program to Western Signs and Line Painting Limited in the amount of $21,635.66 plus HST, and that staff be directed to address the increase of $2,200 through offsetting savings within the tax-supported operation budget. and further that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the necessary contract agreements.
Any discussion, Councillor Alford?
Yes, Western Signs and Line Painting were the lowest bid. Our budget for this was 19,900, and so we're going to make up the difference of $2,200. There was one interesting fact I found about this, is that in this pavement marking program, it includes painting 21 kilometers of roadway center lines, 1,000 parking spaces, 250 stop bars, 100 crosswalks, and over 700 symbols. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit that I did not know before. And that's it.
Any further comments? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Alford, second by Councillor McKenna, pavement marking program. The Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls award tender 19-PW-009-2019 pavement marking program to Western Signs and Line Painting Limited in the amount of $21,635.66 plus HST, and that staff be directed to address the increase of $2,200 through the offsetting savings within the tax-supported operational budget, and further that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the necessary contract agreements. All in favor? Carried. And Councillor Allen, you have the last miscellaneous motion.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Alford. Municipal Heritage Committee Properties of Interest. That the Council of the Town of Smiths Falls resolve to recognize the properties known as Washburn Block, 2 to 28 Beckwith Street, J.M. Clark Hardware Store, 1 Beckwith Street South, Alexander Clark House, 17 Main Street East, Rideau Theatre Building, 1 Chambers Street, Matthew Ryan House, 102 Brockville Street, Adam Foster House, 84 Brockville Street, John B. Ward House, 110 Brockville Street, and Simpson House, 81 Brockville Street, under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act, RSO 1990, as amended, and place all properties on the Municipal Registry of Properties of Interest. Amen.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Allen.
Yes, these are beautiful historic buildings that all have cultural and heritage significance to our town. Many of them were designed and created by families that are long gone, but still remain part of our history. And this, what we're doing now by putting them on properties of interest, is going to prevent them from being demolished without thought and consideration. And what we really are hoping is that soon we'll be bringing them back to be designated so that they become part of our designated properties.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Dwyer?
I'm hoping that this will be the beginning of a much-needed change of attitude around heritage conservation in the municipality, and I look forward to seeing many, many more of these come forward in the next 3.5 years.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Allen, second by Councillor Alford. Municipal Heritage Committee Properties of Interest. The Council of the Town of Smiths Falls resolved to recognize the properties known as the Washburn Block, in brackets 2 to 28 Beckwith Street, J.M. Clark Hardware Store, 1 Beckwith Street, Alexander Clark House, 17 Main Street East, Rideau Theatre Building, 1 Chambers Street, Matthew Ryan House, 102 Brockville Street, Adam Foster House, 84 Brockville Street, John B. Ward House, 110 Brockville Street, and Simpson House, 81 Brockville Street, under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act, RSO 1990, as amended, and place all properties on the Municipal Registry of Properties of Interest. All in favor? Carried. Inquiries and announcements. Councillor Alford?
Just one, I had the absolute pleasure to have dinner with 3 of the medical students from Ottawa U that were billeted in Smiths Falls last week. And I want to thank the host families that have taken them in. But they were so struck by our community, because 2 of the 3 were from the GTA. They reminded me of why we live where we live. They were awestruck, and could not stop talking about the sense of community, to go into a store and have people say, "How you doing?" or to pass people on the street and them say good day to you. And they couldn't believe who knew who and who was related to who and how did you know that. And it really was awe-inspiring to them, coming from the GTA and living there their entire lives, that we are so connected in this community. And so much so that one of them called his mother the next night to say, you have to come down here. So while we may not be successful in wooing some of those medical students, we may be successful in wooing some of their parents.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor McKenna.
Just on that vein of, I was invited to sit with some local healthcare providers, looking at how we can continue to have improved access to primary healthcare in our community going forward, and they're working on a plan through collaborative efforts to ensure that our access not only is maintained, but it gets improved going forward. So it's great to be part of that, and it doesn't replace Councillor McGuire's good work on the physician recruitment task force. I think it complements that work as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, announcement on Saturday, this coming Saturday, June 8th, at 10 a.m., Evergreen Avenue is going to be having their dedication ceremony. They were here a few weeks ago to tell us about Evergreen Avenue, what it is and what it's all about. It's a function of real as well, so celebrating environment and builders of our community. We're going to have 7 builders of our community of different backgrounds, interesting stories, each one of them, and their families will be there to tell us about them. And also Real will be doing a couple of presentations around Environment Week, recognizing some citizens in our community who are doing great work in environmental work, and I don't know if it's plastics or not, but I suspect some of it is. And so that's this Saturday at 11 a.m., and everyone, of course, is invited to be there and celebrate with us.
Thank you.
11. Yeah.
And just one final announcement. Festivals and event season is upon us. Of course, we had Paddle Fest last weekend. This weekend, June 8th and 9th, is the Spirit of the Drum Powwow, which we held on Duck Island. It's running from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Saturday and 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sunday. I think formal ceremonies are about noon both days. Tremendous event, being organized by students at SFDCI. So it's a great opportunity to get out, learn more about the cultural history of our Indigenous people, and to hopefully have a great weekend in our community. Any further inquiries or announcements? Motion for adjournment is with Councillor McKenna.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Allen. This council will return to proceedings at 7:35 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor McKenna, second by Councillor Allen. Adjournment is council adjourns proceedings at 7:35 p.m. and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? We're adjourned. I meant to say welcome Brian Turner.